Hi everyone, it's Sandy, and today I'm going to do my September wrap-up, so I'll be talking about all the books that I read in the month of September. I ended up reading 6 books in September, and 5 of them were audiobooks. At the end of August was the beginning of the fall semester of my senior year, so this current semester has just been so busy. Because I'm driving to and from school and to and from my internship, I have a lot of time to listen to an audiobook while I'm commuting, so lately I've been listening to a lot of audiobooks. The first audiobook that I listened to in September is Tyler Johnson Was Here by J. Cole. This book follows Marvin Johnson, who goes to a party with his twin brother Tyler. At this party, a shooting occurs, which is followed by a police raid. Marvin and Tyler get separated. Marvin does get home safely, but Tyler has gone missing. Later, it's been found out that Tyler has been shot and killed by a police officer. This is just such a heartbreaking story about police brutality, and it's just so important because police brutality is still a relevant issue. I thought the narrator did a fantastic job. Marvin's grief was palpable. I especially loved the friendships that Marvin had in this book. I thought that they were so supportive and understanding of what he's going through. If you've read Dear Martin and The Hate You Give and you want to read more, definitely check out this book. Overall, I would rate this book a 4 out of 5 stars. The next audiobook that I listened to is This Is Our Story by Ashley Elston. This is a mystery thriller book that revolves around 5 boys who went hunting, and one of these boys gets shot and killed. It is assumed that one of these boys killed their friend, but no one knows who did it, and none of the boys are owning up to it. The book is told in the point of view of a girl named Kate who is in her senior year of high school, and she works at her district attorney's office. Her boss is responsible for dealing with this case revolving the boys, so she gets sucked into this whole mystery and trying to figure out what happened and who's responsible. I don't really have much to say about this book, but I thought that the plot was really interesting. However, I felt like the story really dragged at times. I wasn't very into the romance that took place in this book, and I felt like the ending was very anticlimactic. A majority of the story was this huge build up to this big reveal, but once it was revealed, I just felt a little bit disappointed. I just kind of expected more from this big reveal, so I ended up giving this book a 3 out of 5 stars. The next audiobook that I listened to is another mystery thriller book, but it's an adult book, and that is Pretty Girls by Karin. I really want to get into reading more adult mystery thriller books because I find that a lot of the young adult mystery thriller books have been kind of disappointing for me. There are definitely a good handful that I've really enjoyed in the young adult category, but I just want to branch out of that and read more adult mystery thriller books. This book follows 2 estranged sisters, and one of them is named Clare, who is the wife of this very wealthy husband, and the other character is Lydia, who used to have a substance abuse issue. She's in recovery now, but she's a single mother. She's dating an ex-con, and she's struggling to make ends meet. When they were younger, their older sister Julia vanished without a trace, and the story takes place many years after Julia's disappearance. Another teenage girl has disappeared, and Claire and Lydia think that it's connected to their sister's disappearance. So as a result, they end up finding their way to each other, and the story goes from there. There are definitely a lot of content warnings for this book, such as murder, violence, rape, torture. The violence in this book is very disturbing, dark, and brutal, and the depiction of violence is pretty graphic. I was listening to this as I was driving to my internship, and there were definitely parts that made me cringe because of some of the violent depictions of murder in this book. So definitely keep that in mind before picking it up, or do more research about the book if you're interested. I was sucked into this book from the very beginning, and I was pretty much really engaged throughout. I went into this book blind. I had no idea what it was going to be about. I just knew that it was a mystery thriller book, and I really like that I went into this book not knowing anything because I really enjoyed learning more about Lydia and Claire individually and seeing how they connected to one another and where the story goes once they have reunited after so many years of not speaking to each other. It was really interesting to learn about their past and their family dynamics, which are really complex. All the twists and turns definitely kept me on the edge of my seat. I ended up rating this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I can't really pinpoint why I took off a star, but I didn't love it enough to give it a 5 stars. The next audiobook that I listened to is Clockwork Princess by Cassandra Clare. I have finally finished rereading the Infernal Devices trilogy, and I still have to get to City of Heavenly Fire to finish my reread of The Mortal Instrument. I'm really glad that I made the decision to reread these books because there are so many things that I've forgotten that happened in these books, and it's just so nice to be reminded of them and seeing some of the things that connect to future books. For example, I'm not going to go into spoilers, but there's a scene at the end of the book involving Cortana. You get this backstory of the sword, and you see it in the Dark dark artifices over 100 years later. Just so amazing, and it makes me emotional. And I actually finished listening to this audiobook in the car, and the epilogue scene gets me every time. The epilogue is just full of feels. This makes me pumped to get into City of Heavenly Fire, and then eventually waiting for the last book in the Dark Artifices to come out. I'm glad that I finally reread Clockwork Princess, and I would give it a 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I finished is one that I actually read myself. It's the only book that I physically read in September, and that book is The Kiss Quotient by Helen Hoang. This is an own voices book that follows Stella, who has Asperger's. She believes that she needs lessons on how to be good and comfortable at sex and being in a relationship. So she hires an escort, Michael, to teach her. I've heard amazing things about this book, and it definitely didn't disappoint. First off, I love the characters in this book. It's told in dual point of views, and I really like that for romance books. I don't read many adult romance books, but yes, there are definitely quite a handful of steamy scenes in here. But I really love the development of Stella and Michael's relationship. I think that individually these characters are great, but together they're amazing as well. I do want to mention that Michael is Vietnamese and Swedish, and I absolutely love seeing a bit of Vietnamese culture and a lot of Vietnamese food incorporated in this book. Seeing all the Vietnamese food just made me really happy to read about it, because every single dish that was mentioned are dishes that I would eat at home. I really loved Michael's family dynamic because he comes from a really big family of just him as the older male sibling and a bunch of sisters and a single mom. I really enjoyed seeing the portrayal of that family relationship. Michael was incredibly understanding, and I really appreciated the importance of consent in this book. I wasn't a huge fan of the plot, but I did really enjoy seeing the progression of Stella and Michael going into this fake dating relationship, which eventually develops into this real relationship with real feelings. Stella is also really smart. I loved being in her head and reading about the way that she thinks and how certain situations are overwhelming for her, because I could definitely relate to some aspects of that. Overall, I would rate this book a 4 out of 5 stars. If you're in the mood for a steamy romance, I would highly recommend this one. And the last audiobook that I listened to in September is The Diabolic by S.J. Kincaid. I actually forgot that I owned a copy of this book that has annotations from the author, so I should have remembered that so I could go through these annotations while I was listening to the audiobook, but I'll definitely try to do that later. This book follows a character named Nemesis, who is a diabolic, and her only purpose is to protect a girl named Sidonia, who is the daughter of a senator. One day, Sidonia is summoned to the imperial court by the emperor, but Nemesis and Sidonia's parents know that the emperor has ulterior motives to summoning Sidonia to the imperial court. So instead of sending Sidonia, Nemesis is sent to masquerade as Sidonia. Nemesis is now immersed in this world of politics. I really love the concept of the story and reading about this world. I thought it was really cool to learn about. It's also set in space. While I really enjoyed the concept of diabolics and this court intrigue, I felt like the story wasn't really going anywhere for most of it. Also, there were a few things that happened throughout the book, especially towards the end, that I was kind of disappointed by. Without going into spoilers, I just didn't like that the author made the decision to do certain things to certain characters. Honestly, I felt like it was unnecessary, and it was just done so to shock the readers. I'm not going to go into details about that, but if you read this book, then you probably know what I'm talking about. There was definitely a little twist at the end that I really liked, but then something else happened that made that twist irrelevant, and I was just like, why? I felt like the romance was kind of sudden. It is told to the readers that diabolics are supposed to be programmed to not feel love or any of these human emotions. They're mainly created to protect the person that they're assigned to. So they do receive all this intense training, and they're very deadly. And that's something that's repeated several times throughout the book. When Nemesis started developing feelings for another character, I just felt like it was kind of sudden. I thought that the main love interest, Tyrus, was a really interesting character. I really wasn't sure what to think about him, but by the ending I am even more confused about how I should feel about this character. I really liked Nemesis' character though. I loved her loyalty to protecting Sidonia. They pretty much grew up together, and they're pretty much best friends as well. When it comes to protecting Sidonia, she does it without question, without hesitation. But throughout this book, she's put into different scenes that makes her think about how she should act. So she's developing some sort of moral code, and she's also developing romantic feelings for Tyrus. The romance didn't go the way that I hoped. Within the first few chapters, I had a feeling of what I wanted the romance to be, but it definitely didn't go in that direction. Overall, I would give this book a 4, maybe a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I still really haven't decided, but for now I'm just sticking to a 4 out of 5 stars. So those are all the books that I read in September. If you read any of the books that I talked about, please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time. Bye!